Coraline and her 2 daughters sell bracelets on a Chicago stoop, unaware that the elegant man quietly watching them for 3 weeks is the key to a cache of 12 letters, capable of tearing the past apart. When the box bursts open, what truths will surface, and who will pay the price? Will the newly forged bond save them in time? The late spring breeze swept through the opulent Gold Coast, but on the gray stone steps before Bel Air, there was only an old burlap cloth displaying shimmering beaded bracelets. Coraline Archer sat cross-legged, her fingers deftly threading nylon cord, her eyes never straying from her 2 children. 11-year-old Aria Archer colored a sketch, while 9-year-old Lyra Archer softly counted the bracelets sold. A few steps away, the glass door reflected suits, silk dresses, and affluent smiles, a silent boundary between them and the world inside. A pair of black leather shoes paused at the edge of the cloth. A deep male voice asked, "How much for that quartz bracelet?" Coraline looked up, meeting the gray eyes of Holden Archer. His tailored suit and woody cologne screamed, "Boutique row, not these steps." $15, she replied, her tone wary. Holden smiled, handing her a 20. "I've noticed this little stall for 3 weeks. Only today did I muster the courage to stop." The word "noticed" sent a chill down Coraline's neck. He'd been watching them? She turned to shield her children, her grip tightening on the cord. "Say what you want, we're busy," Aria whispered. "Mom, sell it!" But Coraline gave a subtle shake of her head. "Sorry if I've upset you." Holden softened his voice. "I'm Holden Archer." The name Archer rang like an alarm. Coraline's body tensed. She nearly sprang up, gathering the bracelets into the burlap sack so quickly the beads clinked. Lyra gasped. "Mom?" Holden stepped back, hands raised. "Have we met?" Coraline's eyes darkened. "No. And I hope we don't." She folded the cloth, slung a backpack over Aria's shoulders, grabbed Lyra's hand, and turned away. Doubt lingered in the breeze. Aria dropped her sketchbook, but Coraline didn't stop. Only when the crosswalk light changed did she notice. At that moment, Holden picked up the book. A family photo slipped out. Everett Archer smiling gently beside Coraline, with tiny Aria and Lyra in front. Holden's hand froze. The face in the photo was his brother, lost to him for 10 years. Across the street, Coraline's steps quickened. The warm spring sun still shone on her back, but her heart was ice cold. Everett's words echoed in her memory. "If he shows up, stay away," she had promised. As the silhouettes of the mother and daughters faded behind a bus stop, Holden stood rooted, the photo trembling in his fingers. His eyes no longer held curiosity, but a heavy mix of confusion and, though he hated to admit it, the dull ache of a fractured family. The glamorous street around him blurred, as if the marble beneath his feet had split in two, one half the life he thought was certain, the other slipping away with the hurried footsteps of the woman named Archer. The sunset poured. Bronze over the skyscraper glass as Holden Archer stepped into his penthouse, clutching the sketchbook Aria Archer had dropped. The family photo tucked between its pages spilled out, Everett Archer embracing Coraline. 2 little girls beaming, a moment Holden had never witnessed. He set the photo on the table and opened his laptop. Typing his brother's name, he found an obituary from 6 months ago. Everett Archer, 36, died of heart failure, survived by wife Coraline and 2 daughters. No phone call, no tears he should have shared. His chest tightened. 8 miles away, in a rented wooden shingled house, Coraline Archer turned off the stove, ladling thin soup for her children. When Lyra asked why the soup was watery, Coraline smiled, for light tummies and sweet dreams, then hid an overdue electric bill under the tablecloth. As Aria did homework, Coraline opened a drawer. Everett's scratched silver watch, medical bills, and a note reading, "Craft Fair, Saturday." She touched the family photo on the shelf, a fragile shield against the storm. On the 49th floor, Holden dug up the last email from Everett, a dispute over an investment fund, ending with Everett's line, You forgot what family means." Back then, Holden had scoffed. Now each word stung like salt. The bourbon in his trembling hand sloshed as he scrolled online, finding a photo of Coraline selling bracelets on the sidewalk. For years, he closed billion-dollar deals, neglecting the one that mattered: family. Night thickened. Coraline closed her expense ledger. Today's earnings, $18, enough for milk but not gas. Aria whispered, "Mom, was that man today a relative?" Coraline replied, "No, sweetheart, it's just us." She avoided her daughter's eyes, afraid Aria would see her own confusion. At the same moment, Holden accidentally knocked over his bourbon, the dark liquid soaking the family photo. He frantically wiped it dry, realizing he still wanted to protect something precious that had faded. He looked up Belair's address, setting an alarm for 6 tomorrow. He'd return the sketchbook and, if lucky, beg for a chance to make amends. Later, Holden pulled out a stack of unopened corporate letters. The profit figures that once fueled his pride now felt meaningless beside the bourbon-scented photo. The hum of the air conditioner reminded him that his sprawling apartment was just an empty shell when no one called his name. In Southport, after tucking her children in, Coraline counted dusty coins. Her fingers bled from beating. She hoped her waitressing wages would rise, but the foreclosure notice sat coldly, weighing down the table. Outside the rented house's window, Coraline whispered to the framed photo, "I wish you were here to tell me what to do." High above, Holden gazed at the same sky, unaware, silently vowing, "Brother, I'll find your family." Two parallel scenes, two quiet resolves began to intertwine like rivers on the verge of meeting. Dawn lit up Belair's storefront, but the steps were bare. Holden Archer came 3 mornings in a row, each time carrying Aria's sketchbook. No sign of Coraline Archer, just affluent patrons and hydrangeas. When Greer Holloway opened the boutique, Holden asked to talk. He showed her the photo. Greer frowned. "An Archer relative?" "Everett's brother," she revealed. Coraline sold goods in the afternoons but had stopped recently due to a gentleman unsettling her. She added, mornings, Coraline waited tables at Marino's on Clark Street. Marino's hummed with the scent of waffles. Holden chose a dim corner. At 8, Coraline appeared, green apron on, face weary. He overheard a nearby table mention the young widow. Guilt surged. When she brought coffee, their eyes met. "I'm working," she said sharply. "Just returning this." Holden placed the sketchbook. She shook her head and walked away. "He left at 20, 5 minutes after your shift." At 11, the diner quieted. Coraline sat across from him, back rigid. Holden produced an old stamped envelope. 12 letters Everett sent me, returned by the post office. I haven't opened them. She stared at the reel-to-sender marks, her face crumpling before a cold wall rose. "My family's had enough cuts," she whispered. "Why now?" "Because I just learned what loss means," he replied. Silence stretched. She exhaled. "One chance for Aria and Lyra." Saturday, 2 o'clock, Oak Park. No gifts, no money, just the truth. Holden nodded, clutching the envelope like a final lifeline. She stood, retying her apron. "Don't make me regret this." He watched her go, knowing those brief 5 minutes had cracked open a door, behind which lay unclaimed letters and mistakes bearing his name. Waiting 3 days, Holden tasted helplessness. He noted bus schedules, counted Bellier's patrons. His analytical habits now applied to personal life. In frustration, he touched the worn stone step where Coraline once sat. Its smoothness testified to her persistence. The last night he spread out hospital bills, waitressing pay stubs, and Aria's overdue tuition notice. Those small figures cast his lavish lifestyle into sharp relief. For the first time he wondered why he'd never sent his brother even a card. The next morning Coraline tied on her Merino's apron, heart pounding. The Archer name meant 2 things: the man she loved most, and the one who broke his heart. Seeing Holden, her hand faltered, but she poured coffee, chin high. Her cold movements signaled, "You can't touch me." In the break room, she pressed her forehead against a locker, fearing the past would burst open in Aria and Lyra's eyes. Meanwhile, Holden, clutching the envelope, pictured Saturday. He'd read aloud the letters he'd once ignored, before two pairs of eyes echoing Everett. No shareholder meeting had ever made him tremble like this. He was afraid but resolved not to let this chance slip away. Oak Street Park on Saturday afternoon glowed with golden sunlight, the lake breeze carrying the scent of grass through rows of maples casting long shadows. Holden Archer arrived early, the stack of letters and old family photo pressing against his chest. He reminded himself this was about heart, not deals. At precisely 2 o'clock, Coraline Archer appeared at the edge of the lawn, keeping Lyra close and signaling Aria to walk slowly. The distance shrank as Holden approached, his heart pounding with each pebble underfoot. He knelt to the children's level. "Hi, Aria, Lyra. I'm your dad's brother." Aria stared intently. Lyra clutched her mother's hand. Coraline stood 2 strides away. "Remember the terms." He nodded, handing over the stamped envelope. The breeze tugged at the paper as she opened the first letter. Everett's handwriting emerged. She read silently, then passed it to Aria. The girl sounded out a passage about her dad building a treehouse with her uncle, her lips trembling but forcing a smile. Lyra hugged the letter to her chest. The air grew heavy, broken only by the rustle of leaves. "Do you like swings?" Holden asked. Aria nodded. At the playground, he gently pushed Aria's back, counting beats for Lyra. Their smiling faces pierced his guilt. From a bench, Coraline watched with crossed arms. Her gaze met his, then darted away. Lyra pointed to an ice cream cart. Holden sought permission. Coraline nodded. When the girls were out of earshot, she lowered her voice. "I don't need favors." "It's not a favor," he replied. "Just time I owe you and Everett." "How long will you stay?" "As long as you allow." They watched Aria flaunt her mint ice cream. Coraline wiped a smear from her daughter's lip, then turned to Holden. "We'll try." The word try was light as a thread, but enough to bind him to a promise. He placed the photo Aria had dropped on the bench. "Your dad loved this one." Aria gently touched its corner. Lyra giggled when Holden recounted how her dad's paper bridge won a science fair. That laughter softened the curve of Coraline's lips. As dusk slanted over the lake, Holden promised to send scanned letters for them to read privately and suggested a dinosaur exhibit next weekend. Coraline said she'd ask the girls. He left the park, tucking the note Oak Street 14 clock into his wallet as a keepsake. Behind him, Lyra's voice echoed, "Uncle, tomorrow I'll tell you about my new cat." "I'll be waiting," he waved. The lake breeze wrapped the child's words around him like an anchor, signaling the gate to redemption had begun to open. In the week following the Oak Street Park meeting, the rhythm of life in Coraline Archer's rented house took on new hues with unfamiliar footsteps. On Monday, as morning mist still clung to the windows, 2 knocks sounded on the wooden door. Holden Archer stood there with hot cocoa and a calendar marked library, museum, used bookstore. He asked for her input, not dictating, but Aria Archer's eyes already sparkled at the blank spaces brimming with promise. That afternoon, 3 rows of community library seats hummed with children's voices. Aria read dinosaur poems, Lyra sat in her uncle's lap spelling her name, and Coraline quietly absorbed the dust-flecked sunlight falling on old book spines. Amid that warm stillness, Holden tilted his head. "The print shop on Dearborn's hiring card designers, what do you think?" A suggestion that rang like opportunity but respected boundaries. As he stepped back to let her decide. On Thursday, they queued for Science Museum tickets. Holden offered his membership card, but Coraline clutched her wallet, wary of anyone paying her way. As the escalator glided to the exhibit hall, she caught Aria and Lyra holding their bunks' hands, mouths agape at a T-Rex skeleton, and for a few heartbeats, she forgot the looming electric bill. At the gift shop, Lyra shyly asked for a magnet. Holden knelt to her level. "If you help Mom bead tonight, I'll get it." The deal, sealed with an eager nod, made Coraline chuckle softly. Kinship turned into a small contract, preserving everyone's dignity. By the weekend, Holden stopped by Marino's during her break, placing a silver-embossed business card from Laurel Kingsley before Coraline. "She plans weddings, needs a meticulous assistant," he said evenly. Coraline turned the card over, fingers dusted with flour, mulling it over. She recalled her no-favors rule, but also the gas bill and her girls' smiles when dinner included a buttered roll. "I'll meet Laurel," she said, brows knitting as if adding a clause, "but the pay must match the work." Holden set down his coffee, the steam masking the relief flooding through him. On Sunday night, Aria pasted a dinosaur photo in her journal, Lyra beaded beside her mother, Coraline sketched her first card design, and Holden researched organic glue recipes. No one mentioned Everett Archer, but as jazz drifted from the radio, 4 hands tapped the table in sync. A new, quiet thread tightened around old cracks, weaving scattered pieces of loss into a gentle circle. The afternoon rain stained the penthouse windows gray as Coraline Archer led her daughters inside, the unfamiliar scent of oak mingling with the cinnamon of cookies Holden Archer had just pulled from the oven. Aria Archer eagerly explored an architectural model on a shelf. Lyra Archer darted around a sofa larger than their entire living room. But Coraline felt uneasy, not from the marble floors, but from the sense she'd forgotten to lock her memories outside. Holden tried to warm the mood, sharing how Everett Archer loved sketching spiral staircases as a boy, playing soft jazz, offering chamomile tea. Coraline nodded politely, but her eyes scanned the room like she was mapping an exit. When Aria asked to see more books, Holden led the girls to a small library. Flit forgot that on the highest shelf, in a dark wooden box, lay remnants of his final fight with his brother. Aria, on tiptoes, brushed the box's edge. In an instant, the heavy object slid off, crashing to the hard wood with a dull thud. The lid popped open, dozens of yellow envelopes scattering like startled pigeons across the Persian rug. Red, "Return to sender" stamps glared in unison, painfully vivid. The air froze. Coraline rushed forward, fingertips grazing the envelopes, recognizing Everett's familiar slanted script. The latest was dated 3 months before his death. She stood, stunned, as if doused in ice water. "You didn't open them?" Her voice rasped, quiet but sharper than a blade. Holden paled, stammering. He'd moved offices, he meant to, but his excuses drowned in the roaring silence ringing in Coraline's ears. She snatched the top letter, tore it open and scanned it. Everett wrote of chest pain, fear of time running out, begging his brother to call before it's too late. Coraline's eyes blurred, then blazed. She turned to her daughter's voice trembling. "Get your coats, we're leaving." Aria, bewildered. "Why, Mom?" Lyra clung to her sister, shaking. Holden reached out to stop them, but Coraline stepped back. "Enough. You let your brother's letters rot in a box. What hope is there for your kindness?" He tried to explain, hearing only his heart pounding like a hammer. The yellow envelopes at his feet stood as accusations. Coraline gathered their bags, pulling the girls toward the door. Their footsteps echoed down the stone hallway. Before the elevator doors closed, she locked eyes with Holden, tears brimming but voice firm. "Don't show up in front of my girls again. They don't need someone who rejects family and then regrets it." The stainless steel doors reflected Holden's stunned face as they shut. In the room, only the rain's rhythm tapped the windows, and the unread letters rustled in the air-conditioned breeze, living proof of the pride that shattered both past and present. The Clark Street clock tower struck 10 at night. As Coraline Archer switched off the vacuum on the 15th floor, her hands throbbing from 3 hours of gripping a glass cleaner bottle. She was about to haul trash to the hallway when she froze. Holden Archer sat on a lobby sofa, dress shirt rumpled, eyes hollow. A neat stack of yellow envelopes rested on his lap like a self-incriminating exhibit. "I waited for you to finish," his voice rasped, so soft the air conditioner's hum nearly swallowed it. Coraline wanted to walk past, but the trash chute's groan behind her signaled no escape. She set the plastic bag down, arms crossed. "Why are you here?" To open them, Holden lifted the letters. Too late, she said icily. He nodded, inhaling deeply. But the night's still here. Exhausted or moved by something deeper, Coraline sank onto the edge of the opposite chair, keeping a few inches between them. The vast plaster ceiling glared with fluorescent shadows, the greenish light making the envelopes look even more jaundiced. Holden tore open the first, his voice trembling as he read. April 5th. Holden, I'm tired of shareholder meetings crashing, or dinners. You're my brother, not a majority stakeholder. He paused, swallowing hard. Coraline closed her eyes briefly, hearing her late husband's echo in the air conditioner's soft whine. The second letter described Everett Archer's hospital visit for a heart check. His worry scrawled, if it goes bad, Aria's middle name should be Hope. Coraline gasped. She recalled that night when Everett asked her to keep it secret so as not to distract Holden from the San Diego deal. By the sixth letter, the handwriting grew shaky. Doc says I need a defibrillator. I'm scared Aria will see her dad wired up. Holden's voice cracked. He handed the letter to Coraline to finish. Her tears fell, smudging the ink into purple blooms. Outside, the floor polisher hummed below, but between them, only breaths and rustling paper remained. The 12th letter, written 3 months before Everett's death. If I go first, help Coraline sell her bracelets. Don't let her fake smiles for creditors. Coraline sobbed aloud, hand over mouth to muffle the sound from the hallway. Holden knelt, placing the stack on the tile floor, head bowed so low his voice was a whisper near her shoes. I'm sorry for missing every call, every last heartbeat of my brother, and of you. Coraline stayed silent for a long time, her breaths shaky. Finally, she picked up the last envelope, pressing it into his hands. Finish it. He opened it. A smaller sheet, just one line. Brother, forgiveness is the last bridge I can still design. Don't let it collapse. Holden broke into deep, guttural sobs, the sound bouncing off the glass walls. Coraline placed a hand on his shoulder, their trembling sinking in rhythm. The office building's night turned into a makeshift sanctuary. The air conditioner's drone a choir, and the unclaimed letters finally found their listener. As early winter sunlight slanted through the Lakeside Bank's glass window, Coraline Archer gripped the safe deposit box key, her heart swelling with a mix of solemnity and anticipation. Beside her, Holden Archer held the hands of the two girls. Aria Archer, with thoughtful maturity beyond her years, and Lyra Archer, eagerly eyeing the glittering granite walls. The steel door swung open, and the manager stepped back, leaving them facing box 104. Coraline took a deep breath, turned the lock. The lid popped up, releasing the faint scent of aged paper like a breath from the past. Inside, instead of jewelry or bonds, lay a thick leather portfolio labeled in handwritten ink, Everett Archer's project for those I trust. Holden lifted it, trembling slightly. They spread the blueprints on an oak table, a lakeside community center with a glass roof to catch rainwater, affordable housing fitted with solar panels, a preschool with a rooftop vegetable garden, every line radiating the passion of a man now beyond time. Coraline traced a pencil sketch of airflow, feeling her husband's heartbeat revive. Holden whispered, "He never gave up his dreams." At the portfolio's end was a carefully penned final letter. Everett entrusted his vision, believing his brother's business acumen and his wife's intuition for people could turn sketches into sanctuaries of hope. Coraline finished reading, tears wetting her lashes, but her voice held firm. Let's turn will into is. Holden smiled for the first time since the night of the letters, his hand resting on hers in a silent vow. That evening, in the small apartment the mother and daughters had just rented, Coraline spread the blueprints across a narrow dining table, the air thick with the steam of spaghetti. Aria gently touched the community center sketch. Dad would be so happy if this became real. Lyra nodded vigorously, her curls bouncing. Holden outlined startup costs, offering to front funds. Coraline insisted on logging every figure, loan amounts, interest rates, repayment terms, because her husband's legacy deserved to be built on integrity, not favors. That night, with the girls asleep, they planned. Coraline would enroll in evening project management courses. Holden would leverage his real estate network to find a small plot near a park, and the first blueprint would be submitted to the Green Chicago 2030 design contest. Before leaving, he hung a wooden sign he'd carved, with Archer Futures on the wall. Just a name for now, but under the table lamp its rough lettering cast long shadows, intertwining with Everett's glass roof sketch like a quiet bridge linking three eras. A mist past, a revived present, and a future just beginning to dawn. The spring breeze, carrying Lake Michigan's mist, swept through the construction site as the sign Lakeside Pavilion Project Archer Futures was staked into the dew-damp grass. Coraline Archer gently touched the plywood base, her eyes gleaming with pride and reverence. Beside her, Holden Archer signed the city contract, his pen strokes resolute, anchoring the past to the present. The pavilion's lightweight steel frame and rainwater-catching glass roof mirrored Everett Archer's exact blueprint. After the bidding, the park board unanimously chose it for being elegant enough for outdoor weddings, sustainable enough for ecology classes. The commissioner's words brought tears of pride to Coraline's eyes. In the first month, Aria and Lyra Archer were given roles as site assistants. Aria marked boundary stakes with colored ribbons, while Lyra logged the project diary, each page tucked with a different leaf to track the changing seasons. Coraline donned a reflective vest, holding a progress chart for the first time. She surprised herself with calm decisions alongside subcontractors, as if years of chasing bills had honed her negotiation skills. Holden stepped back to secure funding but arrived each morning with hot waffles for the crew, a gesture odd for a financier but one that made welders grin and their seams smoother. On the day the mainframe was raised, a crane hoisted the curved steel skyward. Coraline held her breath as bolts snapped into place, imagining Everett's heartbeat pulsing through the drill's hum. That night, she opened an email with 3D progress images sent to the board. Their reply succinct, greener than expected, keep going. She forwarded it to Holden, adding a leaf emoji. He responded with one line, the bridge still. They smiled across screens, both thinking of Everett's final letter. By the third month, the glass roof was complete, its transparent panels scattering sunlight onto recycled wood floors in shimmering pools. Lyra ran circles, her shoes ringing like bells, while Aria set up a science fair model in a corner to test sound reflections. Holden stepped onto the lakefront balcony, the scent of cold water mingling with freshly cut pine. He stood still, then gently pressed his palm to the steel railing, a point his brother once sketched, now real. At the ribbon cutting, an emerald ribbon stretched between two pillars. The mayor gave a speech, but when Coraline spoke, she didn't mention budgets or engineering. She simply shared that a man quietly drew roofs for those caught in rain and wooden floors for children learning to dance. She looked skyward, whispering, "Do you see, Everett?" As she cut the ribbon, afternoon sunlight pierced the glass roof, striking a bronze plaque bearing Everett Archer's name. Holden, Coraline, Aria, and Lyra stood close. In that beam, their four shadows merged into one, stretching long across the rippling water, like a new path linking the shore of the past to the harbor of the future. Soft spring sunlight spilled through the windows of Archer Futures headquarters, a renovated brick warehouse nestled by the Riverwalk docks. 2 years after the Lakeside Pavilion's ribbon cutting, this space had become a living sketch of a reborn family. In the morning, Coraline Archer strode past the reception desk, arms full of thick blueprints. Her hair, occasionally streaked with silver, but her eyes carried the steady resolve of a project director. In the studio, scented with pine and roasted coffee, she paused at Aria Archer's new desk. Now 13, wearing round glasses, Aria tweaked a storm-proof roundhouse model that had just won the city's science fair. Lyra Archer, 11, painted watercolor logos for an arts center brochure up for bidding, her cheeks smudged with paint. On the mezzanine, Holden Archer ended a call with an investor. He buttoned his shirt, but left the cuffs rolled, revealing an ink-drawn bridge by his daughters, a lucky charm and reminder of the company's true purpose. Looking down at the design floor, He saw Coraline guiding Lyra with color mixing, silently counting his blessings. 3 projects completed, 2 new contracts, and most importantly, 3 smiles no longer hiding fear. At day's end, they headed to the Lakeside Community Center, their first project, bridging the past. Today, the City Council added a bronze plaque for outstanding green design. As officials left, Coraline spread blueprints to expand the terrace into a hydroponic garden, asking the girls, "Thoughts from our junior architects?" Arya suggested solar charging stations. Lyra drew butterflies around vegetable beds. Holden grinned, signing the blueprints corner beneath his daughter's signatures, creating a seamless line across 3 generations. As dusk fell, they crossed the street to Greer Holloway's newly opened bakery. Greer, now a regular Archer Futures client, gifted a 2-year anniversary cake. Coraline cut the first slice, thinking of Everett Archer. He lived on in every recycled wood panel in the spiral glass staircase of an affordable housing project set to break ground. She touched the wedding ring hidden under her design gloves, whispering silently, "Rest easy, we're growing your dreams." That night, their 3rd-floor apartment glowed with cinnamon warmth. Lyra spread a new tablecloth embroidered with hope. Arya tested LED lights on her model, and Holden arranged Everett's letters in a glass frame on the wall. No longer indictments, but testaments fueling their fire. Coraline tucked a photo of the 4 at the pavilion behind the glass. Their shadows merged into a roof's silhouette. The radio played an old jazz tune, but this time the bass blended with peals of laughter. The long day closed in sturdy peace. A fledgling architecture firm, 2 brave girls, 2 adults mending the past with action, and a legacy no longer confined to paper, standing tall against Chicago's skyline. The story of Coraline Archer and Holden Archer's road to redemption reminds us that family can break through pride and turn loss into a shelter of hope. Thank you for following Millionaire and Heart Stories. See you on the next journey.